The physical scars will always be there in the mornings and evenings when I get dressed and I stare at my body, now permanently disfigured by the 5 lead bullets Exxon fired into me. The mental scars will always be there as a reminder of the time my own government attempted to execute me, and when they fell, they chose to vilify me. I am Renee Good. I am Alex Preddy. I am Silverio Villegas Gonzalez. I am Keith Porter. They should all be here today. I know each of them would trade my bullet wounds a lifetime of mental distress and a heartbeat to be able to be back with their loved ones this afternoon. And we must also remember the countless other souls who lost their lives at the hands of these entrusted with authority. I drove forward and went around the Border Patrol agents who jumped out of his car and pointed his gun at me. I moved to the far left lane, striking the curb on the far left side of Kedzie. The next thing I knew, I felt a burning sensation in my arms, legs, and that I had been shot by pepper balls, which I also seen these agents fire at people in our community. As I continued to drive past the Border Patrol agents, I could hear my back passenger window shatter, and I felt bullets continue to pierce my body. As I attempted to drive to a safe location, I began to feel lightheaded. I looked down and I noticed blood gushing out of my arms and legs, and I realized I'd been shot multiple times. I told the 911 operator that Border Patrol agents had just shot me and I needed help. I had 7 bullet holes in my body. I remember the agents rushing the nurses to finish up so they could take me with them. I still felt dizzy. I was not able to fully process what had happened to me. After being at the hospital for less than 3 hours, I was discharged from the hospital and took custody of the FBI. One of the agents came out to me with his cell phone and took a photograph of me. It was the same agent who had previously kept coming in and out my room, and I had to repeatedly tell him to leave. I told him I did not consent for him to photograph me, but he did not care. It still haunts me that this agent has my photo on his phone. Was this the agent that shot me? Was this a trophy for him? The news in the jail that evening had my story and was being called a domestic terrorist. They said I quote-unquote rammed federal agents. I was in shock. I heard the government describe me as being armed, even though I knew my gun was always inside my snap-closed holster at the bottom of my purse, where I always kept it. The prosecutor told the judge there was no allegation that I have took the gun out my purse, but that did not stop DHS from continuing to say I was armed. Agent Charles Exxon. Charles Exxon, my attempted executioner, was Charles Exxon. I hope the government does not consider my use of his name here to be considered doxing. But I think it is important now that the truth is out of this case is exposed, that people know his name, Charles Exxon.
This harrowing testimony from Marimar Martinez is just scratching the surface when it comes to, well, the sheer brutality, the violence that Donald Trump's DHS agents and officers have inflicted on the American people as others joined her in exposing the cruelty that the Trump administration is operating with.
On January 13th, on the way to my 39th appointment at Hennepin County's Traumatic Brain Injury Center, I encountered a traffic jam caused by ICE vehicles and no signs indicating how to get around it. I had not wanted to pull into a blocked, chaotic intersection, but verbally agreed to do so and rolled down my window after an agent yelled, "Move! I will break your effing window!" His first instruction. Agents on all sides of my vehicle yelled conflicting threats and instructions that I could not process while watching for pedestrians. Then the glass of the passenger side window flew across my face. I yelled, "I'm disabled," at the hands grabbing at me, and an agent said, "Too late." I felt immersed in a pattern, and I thought of Genoa Donald, an autistic black man, killed by police during a traffic stop in 2021. I remembered Mr. Sliberio Vega Gonzalez, who was killed by ICE in his vehicle last year. An agent pulled a large combat knife in front of my face, which I thought was for cutting me, and later learned was used to cut off my seatbelt. Shooting pain went through my head, neck, and wrists when I hit the ground face first and people leaned on my back. I felt the pattern, and I thought of Mr. George Floyd, who was killed 4 blocks away. I was carried face down through the street by my cuffed arms and legs while yelling that I had a brain injury and was disabled. I now cannot lift my arms normally. I was never asked for ID, never told I was under arrest, never read my rights, and never charged with a crime. Approaching the Whipple Center, I saw black and brown bodies shackled together, chained together, being marched by yelling agents outdoors. I continue to hear the word bodies because that is how agents refer to us. We're bringing in a body. They're bringing in bodies, 7, 8 at a time. Where do I put them? We can't use that room. There's already a body in there. You have no reason to believe you will make it out alive if you are already being called a body. I received no medical screening, phone call, or access to a lawyer. I was denied a communication navigator when my speech began to slur. Agents laughed as I tried to immobilize my own neck. I asked for my cane and was told no, pulled up my arms and prodded forward in leg irons by agents laughing and saying, "Walk, you can do it, walk." I pleaded for emergency medical care for over an hour after my vision had become blurry, my heart rate went through the roof, and the pain in my neck and head became unbearable. It was denied. When I became unable to speak, my cellmate pleaded for me. The last sounds I remember before I blacked out on the cell floor were my cellmate banging on the door, pleading for a medic, and a voice outside saying, "We don't want to step on ICE's toes." I am extremely distressed by the pattern that violence from law enforcement has been happening to Black and Indigenous communities for centuries, and to DHS survivors for over 20 years. We call ourselves a civilized nation, but we lack rules and accountability around what a person claiming to be law enforcement is permitted to do to another human being.
Aliya Rahman's testimony puts a human face on what these policies actually look like in practice. She described being treated not as a person, but as a problem to be controlled, given confusing and conflicting commands, ignored when she explained her medical and disability needs, and handled with a level of force that made an already traumatic situation even worse. What stood out most was not just the physical treatment, but the complete disregard for her humanity while she was in federal custody. This is what dehumanization looks like. When people are reduced to objects, whether their words don't matter, when their pain is treated as inconvenient or exaggerated, that is not about safety or security. It's about power. And when that power is disproportionately exerted against people who are already vulnerable, it's impossible to separate that treatment from the racial and social hierarchies that shape who the state chooses to protect and who it chooses to harm.
At 8:49 a.m., 2 unmarked trucks suddenly boxed in our car. I had been looking down at my phone, but when our car abruptly stopped, I looked up thinking we must be at a red light or in a traffic jam. But to my surprise, I was instead met with four men in face masks, sunglasses, and baseball caps, and guns drawn, pointing straight at us, walking towards our car. These 4 men then tried forcing their way into our car by pulling on the handles. pounding on the windows and yelling at us to roll down the windows, all while failing to answer our repeated requests for their identification and what they wanted. They shattered the windows, and in that moment, the whole world felt like it was the size of the inside of our pickup. And we were sitting in harm's way with nothing to do but record the horrifying experience. Terrified for our lives, Francisco bravely drove straight through the only open pathway down the street, hoping to be driving towards safety, when we were instead met with gunfire. After we had passed the men, one of the 4 men attempted to murder us after we passed by, as he fired and made contact with the passenger side of our car multiple times. I will never forget the fear and having to quickly duck my head as the shots were fired at the car. Any one of those bullets could have killed me or 2 people that I love. We narrowly escaped as pieces of glass fell on our heads as we drove down the bumpy road. 3 minutes changed our lives forever. The incident began at 8:49 a.m. and we were home by 8:52 a.m. By 9 a.m., a police helicopter was flying over our property. Next thing we know, local officers showed up at our home, handcuffed Francisco, put him in the officer's car, and began individually questioning us. The officers then allowed the same 4 men who had just attacked us to come to our home. Those 4 men were asked to identify who they were looking for, but they had zero idea as to who they were even targeting. Pointing to me as the driver, these masked men had just shot at us, and they were now in our home, treating us as the people who had done something wrong. The man who shot at us went to my future brother-in-law, asked him questions about the video we took of their attack, and lied, saying those were not shots. Almost immediately after the officers left our home, 2 men walked up to our gate and told us to let them in. We could immediately tell this was not the FBI, but instead ICE and HSI agents. The HSI agent then said, "Is he here?" But they never clarified who he was. I said we were told the FBI would be coming and we would be waiting for them to arrive. The HSI agent looked at me and said, "For all intents and purposes, we are the FBI." As time passed, more and more ICE and HSI agents arrived in unmarked vehicles with no license plates. They had gear on and walked around our home with submachine guns, assault rifles, and holstered pistols, making sure to keep their hands on their weapons for fast drawing. The agents blocked every exit out of our home and shut the entire block of our neighborhood. More than 20 HSI ICE agents and more than 30 police officers were brandishing weapons ranging from paintball guns to a manned drone, flying and mapping out the layout of our home. Our home that used to be our safe place, now being used as a weapon against us to trap us and take advantage of our surroundings. Then just 2 weeks later, on August 28th, 2025, I was sleeping on the couch when I was awoken up at 4 a.m. by horrified family members telling me that men were entering our property. The men breached our front doors by breaking the locks and yelling that we needed to come out of the house with our hands up. The agents pointed the bright lasers attached to their rifles at each of us inside the home. They even pointed their weapon at my fiancée, who was pregnant at the time. We kept telling them she was pregnant and we would comply. I was surrounded and trapped in a room full of the ones I love and fearing for every single one of our lives. We kept asking for a warrant, and eventually they showed one, and we listened to their commands. Francisco was in his sleeping attire, and we begged them to allow us to give him a shirt and socks since it was cold outside, and we did not know where they were taking him or what they would do to him. We then watched as they took him away, breaking our hearts. Eventually, Francisco went in front of a federal judge who validated that the incident was scary to watch from the recording inside our vehicle. Despite the lies and misinformation given by the agents, the judge believed our truth, and eventually the federal charges were dismissed. However, Francisco was taken to immigration custody and held for 3 months, where he had to endure horrible conditions.
So when you listen to all of these testimonies together, the similarities are impossible to ignore. Different people, different backgrounds, different encounters, but the same patterns of fear, force, and disregard for basic human dignity. That tells us something critical about what law enforcement means in practice for far too many people in this country. And this is the most important point. What these DHS agents did is not a bug or a glitch in the system that Donald Trump and Republicans want to create. It is a feature. It is central to how this model of government maintains control. Control through intimidation, through dehumanization, and through the message that the state can act with impunity. These testimonies are not just about what has already happened. They are a warning to all of us about what becomes normal when cruelty is embraced as policy and accountability is treated as optional.